Welcome to the EdTech podcast, coming to you live from BET. We're spending the day on the show floor, meeting people, having real connections and capturing what's exciting, challenging and changing across education and technology right now. Let's see who's up. Welcome to the EdTech podcast at BET 2026. We have Pablo and Laurie. Would you please tell our international audience and listeners a little bit about who you are and what you guys are doing at BET?
I'm Laurie Forcier. I'm the Vice President for Strategy at EDT and Partners. We're here at the BET Show as we are every year working alongside our clients and with our partners, hosting a suite where we host content, meetings, discussions about what we're seeing out there in education globally, because we are a global consulting firm working with education and the EdTech market. And so BET is one of our biggest shows of the year, and we've had a great show.
Amazing.
Thanks, Felipa, for the invite. I'm Pablo Langa. I'm the CEO and founder at EDT and Partners. And precisely as Laurie described, this is a big milestone in our calendars every year.
Incredible. And they're right at the beginning of the year. So tell us a little bit about what 2026 is holding for you guys. What sorts of things are on that EdTech agenda?
Sure. I mean, I need to start with a little bit of the AI story. Fortunately or unfortunately, it's a big part of what's driving it. Interesting enough, this year, BET it overlaps with Davos and also overlaps with a number of other geopolitical activity that we're seeing. So I think we're living such an interesting time. Just for you to have an idea, we attend more than 60 events around the world. So it's literally every week we have one or two events.
More than one a week.
Yeah. So we were last week actually in an event in Florida. We're here. We had a couple of events, a beautiful event for ladies, leaders in education on Monday, other activities. So for us, in terms of what the year takes, it's probably, hopefully, a little bit more maturity into kind of the AI conversation. And we're seeing good progress in terms of governance. And I think one of the benefits that impacts all the edtechs around the AI conversation is that actually we're starting to connect that with more the components of like screen value, the components of like the making sure that we are impacting learning outcomes. So we want to hear more edtechs that are, concerned about that and making deep investments in there, the same way as school networks and universities are. I think they're openly asking for that type of support from the edtech community.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because actually quite a few people have mentioned on the EdTech podcast this week that they feel that this year feels less chaotic, much more driven around the real questions, the deeper, meaningful questions of how is that impacting? What is that going to do for my learners? And how can you keep them safe? What are these sort of guardrails that you've put up for your platform? And almost holding EdTech companies a little bit more accountable so that they themselves can have a little bit more understanding and knowledge around what they're providing for students in their classroom.
Yeah.
Well, this is a moment in time this year when we're going to see a lot more regulations come into force around accessibility. We're hearing from folks out of the US that there's rules coming into place around accessibility, some that we know about, some that we don't know about right now. And so I think that's helping to crystallize some of those questions around what's important and what people need to be very concerned about. So it's bringing I think a really positive focus around the responsible use of technology, a reset and a rethink around when do we need to use it and also when do we not need to use it. I hope that the year sees a move away from these kind of real dichotomous conversations around like, let's ban everything because it's not reasonable in terms of what real life is like and is going to be like. I heard associated with those conversations also more of a focus on parents, particularly thinking about, yes, we need AI literacy for teachers. Yes, we need AI literacy for children. But that also means that parents have to be part of this conversation, and it's not a bolt-on. No, it needs to be completely part of it. So I heard from Daniel Emerson at the Good Future Foundation say they're piloting a new parent-focused training based on that. And I'm starting to hear more exciting things around that I think is a really positive for 2026.
Yeah, and that is such a vital part of it. I mean, even from when I first started in EdTech, 10, 11 years ago, that conversation was being had then of parents who were concerned, they didn't know, they wanted that knowledge. And actually bringing them into the loop of this is vital because, I often reflect on the fact that actually at school we didn't have it. So no one taught us. We've had to learn and get on with it ourselves. And then when you come into becoming a parent, you're again in a very different trajectory. You've not had those mistakes that you could make. You don't have that opportunity to reflect. You haven't had that modeling from your own parents around it because it's so new. It's something we're all going to have to get used to.
And it's interesting, and perhaps we can all reflect on this too. I know Pablo and I talk about this, that we work in education technology. We have children who are using technology, and we don't feel we have all the answers. We heard from Erin Moat, who joined us in our suite this week to talk with Pablo about AI, and she reflected the same thing. One of the foremost leaders, really thinking and pushing for this in the US. And she's like, look, I don't have all the answers, and you need to figure that piece out.
I think it's going to be definitely, I would hope very much in exactly the same way you said, that we stop with the banning and think more logically around that efficient use of it and actually seeing it as the tool that it is and that it is going to be part of our lives, and it's just getting used to that. What other sorts of trends and things are you seeing then? So obviously AI, parents, what else is happening?
I think this is a year we're still going to be a lot influenced by some of the trends around kind of screen, no screens, etc. As you were describing. I think this will continue to be a relevant topic. We've seen this happening in the past, and probably this will be a wave of like, we ban phones, but still there's like good solutions out there that are making the right impact. Ultimately, as you were describing, parents want their kids as they graduate high school or as they kind of get into university to master some of these new technologies that they are going to need in the marketplace, right? Social emotional learning. I feel we've talked many years about it. It's the first time that talking to a few secretaries of education that have visited BED, a few large school groups, we are perceiving that people are taking it a little bit more serious. And it's not only the relevance of it to have it kind of embedded in curriculums, to have it as part of a major initiative, but also can impact learning outcomes. It can be an important element of kind of human development as we grow. So 50, hoping that the conversation will continue to mature, but I think it's going to be an important part of the agenda for the rest of the year. And I think there is an element on the governance, right? It's like yesterday in one of the discussions we were having in our space was like, how's the future of a school or a university that has like 1,000 agents deployed? How does the governance of that look like? How does the governance look like when a good educator can create other bots or their kind of agents for the rest of his peers, or a good student for his peers, or like a parent for other parents in a school system? I think it's important that we think more about how to make perhaps a quick few mistakes, rapid mistakes there, so that we can kind of put the governance that will continue to grow. But we think probably the rest of the year we'll continue to see that conversation maturing. Global frontiers, everyone, because of the geopolitical situation, is another big topic that we hear. We see a lot of the EdTech players from North America with more energy than ever on their interest of going elsewhere due to kind of funding resources, etc. So that's going to continue to be a trend. If any word of advice, anyone that's listening, it is not easy. And one of the things that we normally say is like, you need to know how they like their coffee in the country that you are trying to do something there. It's not as simple as I'm going to localize the product, or it's already localized, or I'm going to sell into my American schools in a country. It takes so much more.
No, I couldn't agree more. And actually, we've had a couple of conversations this morning, even just around that idea of the regionalization and it being really important to understand the nuances, the values, the visions for that country, and who those learners are in the classrooms and who those people are that are deploying the education as well.
I want to follow up that point Pablo made about social emotional learning, because what I've heard across a couple of different conversations is that merging more deeply with the skills conversation. So skills not being digital skills or AI literacy, but more, and I heard this across a couple different conversations about the social emotional learning, agency, self-regulation being key skills that are needed and desired and being designed within school settings. In our space yesterday, we held a session on the new operating model for education. And we had Jenny Anderson, the author of The Disengaged Teen, with us talking about student agency and how we think about technology around student engagement in a positive kind of way. We had a wonderful Al Kingsley with us. We had Stuart Briner from the International School Partnership Group talking about how they're trying to design for those kinds of skills within their schools really intentionally. And then earlier that same day, I had been at an investor breakfast hosted by Nick Kine from Titan Partners and the UFI Votech Trust. And the investors in the room were talking about the same thing, like those are the things that they were looking to invest in, things that kind of support that kind of skills-based agenda. Again, talking more about, how are we developing these human skills, how that's going to make a real difference.
Yeah.
I think not only those it is a real, I think, trend that we're going to continue to see, a welcome one again.
Yeah. And that is so vital, I think, as well in this day and age where we are seeing so much technology and there's a lot of reliance on it. And there's a lot of people who potentially, because of they're either going full force or they're ignoring it altogether. There's an awful lot of students who are taking advantage of both of those scenarios and utilizing technology a bit too much. And actually those important skills of being able to communicate what you know, telling people about that knowledge, making sure that you can, articulate yourself in the most effective way are going to become really important parts of the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially in a world where, a lot of the coding and kind of some of the things that we expect and we're seeing not only in this industry, but others being automated even more so.
I mean, you can make apps in seconds these days, can't you? I mean, how good they are, would be a bit more questionable. But absolutely, I think it's the ability to articulate your thoughts and feelings and around certain topics are going to be much more important than those skills like coding, unfortunately. And so what have you been having conversations? You've been talking about their investors at Bet. What sorts of things that you have been a bit different, that have got a bit off piece, that you thought, I've not heard about that before or yet?
That's an interesting one. I want to make sure that we touch on something that probably has been left field or like we're not expecting. I'll tell you a few of the things that we've seen kind of in terms of commonalities, right? Like the consolidation in the schools market globally, right? I think that continues to be a trend. I think probably for me, something that's perhaps surprising is how resilient this EdTech community in general continues to be, right? Like we see the investment, as you were describing, probably for early stage startups have been drying. Yet you walk on the floor here or some of the conversations we'll be having, there is still kind of that tremendous appetite of really impacting education from a lot of entrepreneurs, from a lot of different initiatives. So perhaps in reflection, that's one of the things that has surprised me. Like, even though the geopolitical situation is what it is, situation is complex, it's probably, I think I read somewhere, is like, it's never been easier to build education technology, but it's never been more complicated than it is right now to actually sell it, right? So I think that's probably surprised me, that the level of energy from the entrepreneurs and from the different companies kind of is at top levels regardless of that. So I think kudos to the community for continuing pushing.
I agree massively. I think one of the things that I really admire is the fact that actually educators are now saying, well, what does it do and why and how is it helping? And they're questioning it. Whereas, when I first kind of moved into specifically running EdTech in schools, it was very, oh yeah, we've got this, we've got that. And it was, okay, but what does it do? Oh, no, just use it. And actually now we're going back and saying, well, actually it hasn't shown the impact or it isn't doing that. And so keeping EdTech companies on their toes and saying, we need you to not just be selling to us because we're education and you might be able to make a quick buck, but actually, what is it doing? How is it impacting? And what's the impact that it's going to have on my students? Yeah.
Sorry, I think one reflection, probably something that has surprised me a little bit, and I don't know if other people are seeing the same thing. We see I was surprised to see like the lines in between the school operators, the EdTech providers, the content providers are being more blurred. So precisely because perhaps it's easier to build technology, or it looks easier to at least to build technology, we're seeing more groups deciding as a school group, it's like, maybe I want to build that piece instead of actually licensing it or like buying it from a vendor. And you see on the content side, it's like, oh, we need to be much more technology enabled. And you see the technology players saying, well, we don't need anymore maybe the content partner for these specific things, right? So I think the lines are being blurred and we are seeing the first evidences of those here a bit this year. So yeah, I will see how that continues to evolve.
This is exactly what I was going to point to as well. In the one case, that build versus buy conversation has shifted into schools in an interesting way, particularly those that are well-resourced. But also, I mean, just this week, I reached out to a CEO that's part of my network to see if I could connect that person to someone who's doing a related piece of work. And he said, I'm so sorry, but I've stepped away because of what we can do with AI. You can build now, for thousands of pounds, what you could build for millions before. And I'm taking on a big AI project. So that was certainly one thing for me. That really did happen. And the second thing I would say is I've seen some really wonderful conversations this week. Pablo and I have both been part of these, between educators, folks in schools and in industry and in technology, coming together in different kinds of ways. And not looking at each other and saying like, we don't understand how we could possibly work together. We don't know each other's language, and saying like, yes, let's do something together in like a really exciting kind of way. So I think that's something quite positive as well.
Amazing. Wonderful. So slightly outside of BET, what are we seeing globally? What are the kind of trends that maybe you've seen last year that are starting to emerge that you're seeing, maybe some people really front running and really kind of flying the flag for certain things? What's happening?
I think there is, on the flip side of some of the mature economy situation, if you take the US or the UK perhaps, and kind of investments into technology there, I think there's so many green roots and positive news coming from places like the Middle East, right? So I think that there are a number of like both on the public sector and private sector initiatives that I think are world class and that could become for other nations and other providers. And that's perhaps that positive economic backwind, but also the demographics in some of the places in the Middle East where you have like a heavy unemployment for the youth and they need to think very creatively on how to scale those resources and to leapfrog their economies in novel ways that we haven't seen before. So I think there's kind of a number of initiatives out there, especially touching more on the skills development, kind of youth, vocational kind of segment that could become examples in many other places. And then, there are the complexities, right? Like when we think about, and I want to kind of continue with the AI, but a lot of AI around English. But how many people have tried to do quality AI in Arabic?
Oh, absolutely.
It has its own nuances. Let me tell you that. And its own loops that you need to go into. So those are the type of things that we see, like because of the nature of the regions, like for example, in the Middle East, are phenomenal lessons learned. So you can take that into Portuguese or into like other languages that are not as well served as might be English or Spanish, perhaps. I think there's the China conversation that's very interesting on some of the developments that are happening there and how that kind of education ecosystem starting to kind of reset a little bit. But when it comes to education technology, it will be a market that's interested to keep an eye on as some of the regulatory, major events that happened just before COVID, that those are like being eased a little bit. And there is, I think, interesting things happening out there. I love to see a lot of attention in literacy and numeracy initiatives around the world and how we're trying to push the envelope. I think assessment is another area where there are a number of players that are doing great things. We're very lucky that we work with quite a lot of customers that are at the top level in these fields. And so we have kind of a first row seat from things like might look less sexy, but very important, like SIS activities, like the effective management of a school with AI components. We feel like, for instance, Arbor here in the UK is doing an amazing job and a phenomenal example for the rest of the world, but also initiative for early years. We're big fans of the work, like for instance, like CISO does around the world in that very specific segment. So those should be inspiration for like maybe earlier stages startups on how to put the attention. And I think they all have one characteristic is like they go the 1 mile depth in terms of kind of how to create products and make sure that they are impactful.
Yeah, and I think there's so many resources, isn't there, now that emerging markets can take from and take some really great practice and some great learnings from some of these more, well-established countries and regions that are doing some of these amazing things. Yeah. Amazing. Thank you guys so much for being on the EdTech podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to hear from you, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you, Philippa. Thanks for the invite.
This episode is brought to you by Edmentum, a leading EdTech provider bringing global, future-ready learning to schools in more than 100 countries worldwide. I'm fortunate enough to have long-time familiarity with Edmentum, their commitment to keeping pace with the needs of today's students and then delivering innovative solutions that both accelerate academic achievement across K through 12 and enhance university and career readiness for all learners truly sets them apart. Backed by the highest caliber of research, Edmentum's AI-driven assessment, personalized curricula, and virtual instruction give the tools to prepare students for a successful future. Visit edmentum.com to learn more about Edmentum's comprehensive solutions and how they can help you address your goals. So we are here at day 2 of the BET conference in London 2026. The EdTech podcast, and we have the wonderful Graham Feek from Greenwood Academies Trust here with us. Hello, Graham. How has your day been?
Hi, Philippa. I think I've got a little bit less shoe leather left than when I started the day. And,
hopefully they're comfy ones.
They are today. They weren't yesterday. That was a first mistake of the day. Yeah,
always.
It's been, as it always is, incredibly busy. You forget how many people that you know in the sector. So actually some of those sort of chance discussions are probably the more valuable things that happen in the sidelines of BET. But it's been great, really great. And as I was saying earlier, I had thought this year not to bother because we've sort of done a lot of contemplating about where we're going, what we want, what are the products are fairly settled. So I thought, is there any point? But I'm so pleased I came.
Yeah. And so what sorts of things have you seen? What kinds of things are you hearing about that, been a bit eye-opening?
I guess a couple of standouts. One is a really, I guess, basic but incredibly important thing, which is around hardware supply. We talked to the vendors. They are now predicting COVID levels of shortage of supply.
Yes.
So I think schools wanting to invest in technology for next academic year needs to be buying now.
Yeah.
And even that's not going to guarantee supply. The prices are going through the roof because of a huge worldwide supply and chip issue because of expansion of data centers and AI and so on. So that's quite a practical thing, especially for us because we're going through quite a lot of refresh in that area. I think the second one is the sort of impact of, I guess, the announcement around generative AI product standards on Monday. That's really grabbed people's attention. And, some of the big, global providers of tech, I think, need to be rebasing maybe their approach on particularly pupil-facing AI. I think now there's a realization that maybe we need to take a few steps backwards before we move forwards, and really an emphasis on ensuring that pupils have got the right level of agency in there and it's actually supporting their cognitive development rather than impeding it. And that's quite a noticeable change, I think, from last year. Last year and previous years actually have been very much about the fancy things that you can do with AI in the classroom or outside the classroom, but very much in the classroom. Now, clearly there's still some of that, but I think now from the conversations I've been having, it's a much deeper conversation about Gen AI. It's about building for it. It's about governing for it. I guess, so the iceberg analogy where 80% of this you're not going to see.
No,
and I
absolutely.
think people want to often take the shortcuts to, take the perceived benefits and aren't really thinking through some of the other things. I'd say those two issues probably more so than others have stood out.
Yeah. And I think it's generally been a theme is there's been more of a curated approach, I think, for medtech companies this year based upon the changes and the understanding now for what they're now supplying and conversations from schools and industry experts are having much more of an effect around what is the long-term effect? What do we need to be teaching students? We had media literacy on earlier. We were talking around what do we need to be teaching on the ground and that idea of not putting our head in the sand. And actually there's a lot of things that maybe gaps that we need to fill before we start to go too far with the shiny new toys. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the sort of message I've heard. Really trying to get everything in the right order. Sometimes maybe the ordering's been wrong. Probably trying to move to some of the, what appear to be very beneficial things without really thinking through the full effect of that. I think the other thing that plays into it is around cybersecurity. Some of the vendors we're meeting, where in previous years the customer service, customer facing aspect of that will be around the product. Now it's equally around the security.
Yeah.
Microsoft, the work we're doing with them, it's very much turned 180 degrees in terms of the approach on cybersecurity, really governing where you go to.
Yeah.
And I think a genuine desire for big software houses, as you say, to understand what the needs are and what the particular benefits are and, pedagogically how these tools are working. So, and that seems so in other words, it feels like their approach to developing the software might be a bit more malleable perhaps than it was previous years.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely more of a co-creation and wanting those insights from educators and that pedagogical aspect as well, isn't it? So you obviously have in the Greenwood Academies Trust a large number of schools. How is 2026 going to kind of look out for those schools? What sorts of things are you kind of trying to start to bring in? We know change is an interesting and difficult thing to do, but with all the things happening in EdTech, what are you doing as a trust?
So we've done a lot in terms of I guess getting a lot of the bedrock in place for when we've taken a wider view about how we want to adopt AI. I think it's fair to say we've been relatively cautious about our adoptions, building a lot of, I guess, integrity around systems that we've got and developing new systems, particularly around core enterprise level systems that hopefully will make us a lot more efficient, drive more money into sort of teaching and learning rather than back office. So I think there's been a big move on that. I think in terms of AI, so it is about really, I guess, wanting to be near the forefront of the race to be AI ready. Data quality, data governance, that's a huge issue for us. Absolutely huge. And I think it probably is for the maths sector.
Yeah.
And the more you understand of some of the challenges and risks there, the more scary that is. So I think that's probably our biggest sort of technical challenge. The work we are doing around AI is going to be what we sort of deem as fairly safe spaces. So it's not going to be in that pupil-facing spaces. It's going to be in the sort of organizational, corporate spaces around trying to drive greater efficiency. And I think another key one is around digital culture. Or the education sector struggles sometimes in terms of understanding how best to approach the use of technology. But I think in our organisation, the digital culture is a big piece of work, and that's really a sort of a leadership thing, not a technical thing. I think without that, we can build an awful lot of capability and tooling, and actually the benefits of it are going to be modest, to say the least. And I think if we don't do that, we're doing our pupils and staff a huge disservice. And I think those organisations that do get the culture fixed, are going to be the ones that thrive in maybe 3, 4, 5 years' time.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with the rapid pace of change, to have that embedded already is going to allow people capacity, really, isn't it, to be able to adapt to the change and the new things that are going to come out.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's turning the discussion about technology from being a cost to an investment. And I think a lot of the discussions that I have are often about, well, how cheap can we get it? Do we need to do that? And that says to me, well, actually, if the culture is about how you're harnessing digital technology, it's about how you're investing to support your core objectives and to save money and to be more efficient and make, organisations places that people want to come and work at and where parents want to send their children. So I think that is a big piece of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Graham, for being on the EdTech podcast.
Pleasure.
It's been really lovely chatting to you. Okay. Thank you for your time. Bet 2026 may be done for another year, but the bet story hasn't even begun. As the door closes here in London, the conversations we've been having don't stop. They travel. Across regions, systems, classrooms and communities, education and technology continue to evolve, and Bet remains part of that global journey. Over the months ahead, you'll see Bet showing up around the world at Bet Brazil in Sao Paulo from the 5th to the 8th of May, Bet Asia in Kuala Lumpur from the 23rd to the 24th of September, and heading to the US for Bet USA in Nashville from the 8th to the 10th of November, which was officially launched right here at Bet 2026. And if you can't make it to those, don't worry. We'll be back in London next January for Bet UK 2027, ready to do it all over again. Whether in person, online, or through conversations that ripple out long after the hall's empty, it continues to connect people, ideas, and impact across global communities for education. Bet may pause, but the conversations are only just getting started. So we are here today, day 2 at Bet with the EdTech podcast, and I have Jarno here with me from ReadSpeaker. Please, Jarno, tell us a little bit about you and what ReadSpeaker is all about.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here, having us here in the podcast. Pleasure to be here. Well, like you said, I represent ReadSpeaker. I'm the Director of Education for the EMEA LATAM markets. And at ReadSpeaker, we provide, in very short sentences, we provide a listen option. So it is text-to-speech technology we create ourselves, fully European-based, allowing learners to listen to the content for various reasons, whether they might have a necessity to listen to the content because of neurodiversity challenges or other special educational needs, English as an additional language learners. So in order to have like an actual native voice, pronouncing the content to them, all ranging up to, the wide diversity of learners. And more on the focus or from the focus of universal design for learning to simply make sure that digital learning environments are designed in a way, and that's where we help our customer organizations and our partners, that these environments are designed in a way that accommodates any type of learner, whether that's preference or necessity due to either disclosed or undisclosed additional needs they might have.
And I think that's the basis of universal design for learning, isn't it? We
Absolutely.
We make it so that every single person is included. And if it helps you and supports you, great. And let's get as many people as possible being able to immerse themselves, especially in reading and listening. And I often will read things back to myself. So for instance, I'll do, a screen reader. And my worst thing about that is the fact that even now it can quite often sound quite robotic. But you were just saying then about different languages and accents. Yeah. So
no, we've been on the forefront on using different types of technologies, on being innovative in making sure that our voices are human-like as possible. However, yet it has to be neutral. It has to be usable, applicable to educational content. I mean, we want to avoid that it becomes too much of a steering in the voice. So it has to be neutral. It has to be usable, yet human-like for learners to feel engaged and also to feel represented in the voice they are actually actively using to listen to their content. So we offer a wide diversity in accents, in genders, in age categories of voices available across languages.
Saying age categories, that's something that I've not heard of before in terms of the audio being able to be read to us like that.
Might have a darker voice. My voice is a bit lower. Sometimes people think I sound older than I actually am. I might appear older. So that's like the age category in that. And because we're all human, we all have a personal preference, whether that's in the type of voice or the type of sound we would like to listen to versus the way we prefer to learn and consume new information. And it's actually quite funny to be on a podcast. I always use the term the podcast effect in order to demonstrate the power of what we actually offer by asking people, if you want to learn about a new topic, just imagine what would you prefer?
Yeah.
Read a book or listen to a podcast about that topic. I think the audience of this particular podcast would vote for podcasting, of course.
I'm sure. And I think it is just around, for lots of people, especially neurodiverse learners, is that ability to have multiple different ways of accessing the same content. Now, I know for myself, I like to read and listen, and sometimes when it's very complex and it's maybe something new that I'm learning, I quite like to be able to listen to it over and over again, whilst also potentially having read it as well, because it just helps me to...
Absolutely. There's a whole range of scientific knowledge, of scientific research behind this. That's multimodal learning, so consuming course material in different formats, preferably at the exact same time, helps focus, helps retention, and helps recollection of the actual course content, of the knowledge you're studying. So yes, it's not only a nice-have for a lot of people, it supports the actual learning outcomes and the learning results for learners across the board.
Absolutely, which is what we want, really, isn't it? And we want those lifelong learners. So if we're giving tools and resources to be able to access things in multiple different ways, then that helps us to also want to keep learning.
And that's the beauty of e-learning. I mean, we started off using e-learning in order to achieve scalability and efficiency, but just offering one format, simple text material inside of an LMS and reading from a screen is, well, let's be honest. I mean, if you have to read an email with a 5-page attachment, how engaged are you? How much are you enjoying? Or the other way around, how much do you feel inhibited or experience a barrier in having to consume that 5-page document?
Yeah.
And that's precisely why we need to have a more inclusive approach towards e-learning, towards digital education, in order to make sure that, everyone finds their way that fits their situation or their preference or their additional need best.
So we have the why. How is my next question. Is it something you can get on any device? How does it work? What does it look like for a learner when I'm adding it into my digital system?
Ooh, there's a wide range of possibilities. So I'll not go down the rabbit holes on all the technical side of things, but we integrate in all the major LMSs, all the major e-assessment platforms. Basically, there's no platform yet that we've encountered that we cannot integrate our solution in for an embedded and native solution. But there's also personalized tools that we offer in case that certain educational institutions might use online solutions outside of the LMS, in order to make sure that learners can adopt to that flexible environment or that flexible set of solutions. So it's fully either SaaS, cloud-based, so software as a service, but we also offer on-premise solutions, offline solutions on device, just to make sure that any type of situation is, we have an application for, we have a set of solutions for.
It's accessible for all, really, which is amazing.
Absolutely. And we see, even though education across the world, everywhere there's a primary school and secondary schools and tertiary education, further education. But the actual situation always differs. The amount of digitalization across schools, across countries differs. The availability of digital content differs. So, and also the educational legislation in some cases, or the requirements differ as well. And that's precisely why it's important for an organization like us to be able to offer a wide range of options, just to make sure that we can actually tailor as best in order to serve that learner best.
Well, and you serve an incredibly large market. I'm always amazed at how many different regions get added onto EMEA. So you mentioned Latin America, is that correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Correct.
wow, like right across the world.
Yeah, and that's just me. I actually have we have a North American team as well. We have presence in all across Asia, because there's learners who struggle, and there's digital learning that has barriers and can be more inclusive around the globe. So yes, we're a global organization, which also makes it a lot more fun to work and to execute my work, in the sense of, I know we help a lot of learners across the world. It's what makes me tick. It's what makes me get up in the morning just with a smile on my face. And I'm Dutch, so I cycle to the office.
Amazing.
But I'm the one with the biggest smile on my face heading to work, because I know we help kids, we help learners, we help students get the best results, make the most out of themselves. And it's been my personal drive. If I can make sure that at least one student, one learner, one child gets a proper education, succeeds, gets a good job, and succeeds in life and has a happy life, that's my goal,
isn't it? That's incredible. And so you're here at BET. Is it the first time you guys have been at BET? I feel like it probably isn't, but do tell us.
I think my personal first time at BET is 10 years ago, something like that. As a company, we've been at BET maybe 15 years so far. So we're a BET veteran.
You are amazing. Gosh, 10 years ago, I can't imagine that this place was looking the same as it is right now. As much as it was EdTech, I think it will have been a very different kind of narrative, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. We didn't have the esports departments, even though it's lesser of esports focus. Serious gaming or educational gaming wasn't a thing all the way back then. So yes, we see all those changes over time. It's always fun to see new parts, new applications, and then new innovations across the floor.
Absolutely. It keeps everyone on their toes, doesn't it?
Definitely.
And so what sorts of things, are you speaking here? Have you been on any panels? Have you been doing any discussions with other people? Or is there anything specifically that's really stood out to you?
Well, we've had one of our customers indeed do a presentation on our behalf to showcase, the actual effect it has on learners.
Yeah.
How several of their students feel more empowered, but also how their parents are impacted, in a sense that they no longer have to help be like an educator at home.
Yeah.
But they can go back on being a parent, being a mom again, while their kid studies self-sufficiently or self-reliantly, using our solutions. What most stood out for me so far is the international crowd. That's always the most beautiful thing. I love talking to people. I love meeting new people across cultures. It's just nice to hear how in different countries people treat education, even though it's the same systematic. Kids come in, they learn something new, they have to pass an exam in order to graduate. It's always different. And it's that diversity that I really love about the BET.
That's incredible. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's so amazing to have so many people under one roof who are all here for the same purpose as you. They want to make a difference in students' lives and in learners' lives. And that is the incredible thing around this kind of ecosystem, isn't it? I know that EdTech,
Absolutely.
I genuinely believe that is one of the nicest communities where people are here just to kind of really help and inspire one another. So it's amazing to have you guys as part of that as well as veterans and leading that way. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the EdTech podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's been a pleasure joining you today. Thank you very much for having us.
Okay, we are here at day 2 at BET, the EdTech podcast, and we have Katie with us. Media literacy, what a hot topic. Please tell our international listeners and everyone who couldn't make it to BET who you are and what you do.
Thank you. So I'm Katie Freeman-Taylor. I'm the head of research and policy at Internet Matters, and we're a children's online safety not-for-profit. We primarily exist to support parents with keeping children safe online. Obviously, this is a very hot topic at the moment. So we do this on our website by providing step-by-step guides to set up parental controls. We have conversation starters, how to have a conversation with a child about topics like misogyny or online hate, sort of anything you can think of. But I sit in the kind of policy and research side of our work. So we do regular research looking at what children and young people are doing online, what parents are concerned about, some of the sort of new technologies they're using, what challenges they're facing. We also do regular research with teachers as well to understand what challenges they're facing. And then we use that research to hopefully influence decision makers, whether that's politicians, industry, regulators like Ofcom in the UK as well.
That's incredible. And I can't think of a more valuable service right now, especially for parents with the growing changes within, social media bans, mobile phone potentially. We're looking at all kinds of things to do with smartphone reduction, schools going through all sorts of things. And actually, as adults and parents ourselves as well, we are also doom scrolling and not necessarily 100% au fait with where we should be. So how is some of the research that you guys are coming out with? What's it telling us? What sorts of the support mechanisms are there?
Yeah, so we do a lot of regular research. I think sort of thinking about parents first, we always hear from parents, the number one concern of them is how much time their child is spending on a device. And that's sort of the same from sort of age 5 right up to age 17. Parents, there are resources support that is available to help parents manage that. But I think where the sort of conversation around potentially banning social media and smartphones, it's coming from the fact that parents don't feel like they can control it themselves. In the space of a year, we've seen a significant increase in the number of parents that support a ban on social media. And I think a lot of that is fueled by parents not feeling able to sort of set boundaries, both for themselves, but also for their children as well, and wanting to be able to have sort of a universal or community sort of guidelines around that. So that's certainly one topic that parents tell us about a lot. We also hear from parents sort of the rise of AI generated content, mis and disinformation, scams, all of those sorts of topics are also becoming key concerns for parents. Spending too much time online has always been our number one concern of parents, but actually in our last round of research, mis and disinformation became the number one concern. And I think that's sort of with the rise of AI generated content, hearing in the media concerns about how it might be interfering with elections, that's becoming quite an important issue for parents as well. Children and young people, we do a lot of tracking around kind of what they're using, what new technologies. And a big report we did last year was looking at use of AI chatbots, and this was specifically in the UK. But we found that sort of 2/3 of children were already engaging with AI chatbots regularly. They were primarily using it for homework and schoolwork, companionship and advice. I think just touching on the homework and schoolwork one, at an EdTech conference, I think one thing that was quite surprising to me was most schools hadn't been providing any guidance or support on how they could use AI chatbots for schoolwork, homework, research. And I think a lot of that is, because children are often the first and early adopters of technology, maybe teachers and schools aren't thinking about it. While the UK government has provided some guidance to teachers, it's more around how they can use AI to make teaching and their jobs more efficient and effective, and less about how it should be being used in the classroom. And children are using it in really interesting ways. Some are using it for language development. Some are using it to kind of build on their learning skills, but often they're using platforms that aren't built for children and young people, which of course can lead to challenges as well. And obviously you will have seen, I'm sure, in the media and in the US, a lot around kind of children getting advice from AI chatbots, potentially becoming more dependent on for information attachment as well.
Absolutely. And I think that comes to as well that them wanting to ask questions that perhaps they don't have a trusted adult for, or they don't want to ask a person, and maybe see that as an ability to have, a conversation without somebody, questioning them about why they're asking that, and actually just giving them an answer. And, it's not always the right way to do it, but could potentially be from things like that. And it's really interesting, actually, the way, you're so right. A lot of schools, especially with the kind of age verifications in terms of, you have to be 13 and above with parental consent to be able to use AI. Almost, is it that kind of, okay, well, it's fine because they can't use it, so we don't need to tell them about it. Whereas actually, we're probably better to inform more and over-inform.
I think you're completely right. That's something that schools regularly come up against and is really difficult for them. So a lot of schools do not feel confident teaching about sort of AI literacies, AI in general, and media literacy on social media platforms, which often have a minimum age of 13 plus. We know that children are engaging with those platforms before those ages, and it's sort of difficult. Schools are like, for this child safety purpose, keeping children safe online, they should probably be teaching about them before the age of 13, but often they don't feel that they should be doing that because that could also encourage children onto the platforms. I think a really simple solution that we often advocate for is having age checks for those minimum age so that there is enforcement, and therefore we would know that children aren't on those platforms because it was rigorously being enforced by the platforms, and that would hopefully take away a problem for teachers, but also clearer guidance from government as well on, will they be punished, or for them to talk about these platforms before or when they know children and young people are already engaging with them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it's the same with all sorts of things. There are things that are illegal but still happen, and actually it's the awareness. I had a flashback to like DARE when I was at school, and it wasn't that anyone in my primary school was taking drugs, but it was that awareness of this is a real thing and actually we need to talk about it. And I often personally liken teachers' fear of talking about online safety and things that are happening with the AI and things because of their lack of confidence for it. A little bit like talking about sex education. It's that fear of, oh my goodness, what if they know more than me? What if they're going to ask me a question that I don't know the answer to? Are we seeing more really kind of rigorous frameworks coming out, or even guidance curriculum-wise around AI and media literacy?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. So we did some research about 18 months ago now, and we asked those working in the education space, including teachers, about how they teach media literacy in their school. And media literacy means different things to different people, but we take quite a broad approach. It's around mis and disinformation. It's around online safety. It's about AI literacies, not just using AI, but also what is the broader picture. And we found that often teachers didn't feel confident to teach about these topics. And we heard from children and young people that often they would get taught quite a lot about password security. Maybe they'd have 3 or 4 lessons on that, and then half a lesson on sort of online relationships. Because as you can see, teachers are probably much more confident teaching about passwords than they are about meeting strangers online and potential risks there. So I definitely think there's more need for training and support for teachers through their initial teacher training, but also investment in CPD. And that needs buy-in from, the top level, the senior leadership within schools, governors, but also the government setting that direction as well. As well as training, we also want really good resources. There's so many resources out there. Organizations like Internet Matters deliver them, but the PSHE Association, the government themselves have resources. But schools often might not know which ones to use, or, they don't have the time to necessarily find the best ones for them. So I think what would be really helpful, particularly in the UK, but also globally, is some sort of like hub where they can go to and say, this is the age group I'm teaching, this is the curriculum I'm teaching, and have access to really high quality resources. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel there. There's so many, even at BET, there's so many organizations that are already delivering that. And then I think the final thing for media literacy and AI literacy, with the curriculum review in the UK, it's really great that they've sort of pulled out media and digital literacy and how important that is, particularly in a digital world. But now what we really need to see from government is action on that and clear guidance for schools. What we find at the moment, and in the research we did, was that there's lots of opportunities to teach media and digital literacy in the curriculum, and there's lots of sort of places that are signposted for it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it gets taught, because if there isn't a clear sort of competency or key skill or knowledge that it needs to be taught somewhere, it can often be missed altogether. And that's what we often find in the UK.
Absolutely. And I almost feel like a little bit more accountability as well, that actually every subject does need to teach it. And there is an opportunity, as you say, across all curriculum areas, I believe these days, to be able to teach that. And actually it's that impact of saying, no, you have to, because it's vital.
Yeah, absolutely. You often hear teachers don't want more put into the curriculum, and I completely sympathize with that. But I don't think it necessarily needs to be more. It's just about taking things you're already teaching and putting a digital lens onto that as well, and giving sort of clear guidance around how that can be done. And I think also, in a digital world, these topics are really important. Media literacy is sort of how, intertwined with English, with understanding statistics. It's intertwined with science as well, and the mis and disinformation that spreads there. So I think it's really important that it is thought about across all of those subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder recently, I don't know whether everybody has been, but I've been getting a lot of these kind of like, 2026 is going to be the kind of year where everyone says, I want it all to be natural. It should be all created by the person. It shouldn't be AI generated. Going to kind of see that kind of reflection and reversion back to the good old days. How much do you see that coming through? And do you think that will have an impact?
So I've seen similar things just sort of in my personal life. I think the challenge with that narrative is people maybe that's when understanding or the AI literacy component is perhaps a bit naive when we think about how embedded AI is in all of our lives. I think there was a great piece of research done by someone where they were like, I'm going to try not to use AI for an entire day. And it was like, oh, well, you can't look at the weather forecast because that is, uses AI. You can't use your water because actually how they flow the water around the city is based on AI. And so I think there's a lot of positive use cases, and I think it's maybe more people are thinking about their own critical thinking skills and how it applies to their life. I think it's about where there is benefit, leaning into that, but also teaching those broader kind of risks and challenges. And children and young people, they need to have critical thinking skills, and that helps them to engage appropriately with AI. So I think it's a core to it is the media and AI literacy.
That's incredible. And so today we're obviously Better Day 2. Are you doing any talks here? Have you got anyone specific that you want to kind of be able to meet up with and have a conversation with that's interesting you?
So yesterday I spoke in the main arena, and we were talking about media literacy and sort of what's coming on the agenda in the UK, things like the Votes for 16, the curriculum review, potentially regulating smartphones and social media more. So a very pertinent conversation, and it was really great to engage with people after that. Today's a little bit of a lighter day. I'm hoping to get around some of the stalls, see what tech people are working on. I spotted Ofsted were here, so maybe ask them how they're going to implement the mobile phone policies that have just come out in schools. So more about talking to people today, I think.
Incredible. Just making those connections. Absolutely. And what would be the kind of one incredible thing that you would be able to say to educators or school policymakers even, or school leaders? Like what was the one thing that you would ask people to do that's just, that will really help support this kind of mission to help everybody understand media literacy a bit more?
Gosh, that is a big question. I have so many different things for so many different people. I think for me, it's a bit of coordination across schools, across the regulator, across government departments, parents. I think everyone and organizations like ourselves as well, I think everyone is doing great work and thinking about some really sort of interesting challenges and opportunities, but it's about connecting that all together and make sure we're not repeating stuff and there aren't any gaps in what we're teaching and bringing children up to speed and, opportunities that schools could be making the most of. I think at times we tend to work in silos, so how can we bring that more together?
No, I absolutely agree. Those conversations and discussions need to be together, right, so that we can have that one message that's unified. That is amazing. One last question would be 2026. What do you see kind of the biggest mission trend to be?
I mean, what I will say is, despite what we were talking about before about potentially people maybe going back to that more natural side of AI, I would say this year at BET, I've noticed even more AI. It's in almost every single kind of talk. It's in everyone's signage. So I think it's about probably creative uses of it, and I think embracing it with a sort of child safety and safeguarding lens. I think maybe for the last year, it's been or the last few years, it's been adopted sort of day to day, particularly chatbots, but other applications as well. There's been sort of everyone just trying it, giving it a go, maybe without the safeguards. And now we're realizing, actually, we need to make sure we get this right before we roll it out to the public. So I think a safer approach to AI this year.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Katie. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. That's another conversation from BET. There's plenty more to come as we continue talking to the voices from across the global EdTech community. Stay with us for more live conversations from the heart of the event.